Okay. All right, here we go. Jeddy, good to have you here, brother. Welcome. I'm going to go ahead and do
Uh,
a proper introduction. Can you hear me okay? Sound good and everything?
Sound great, man. Honored to be here. Let's do it.
Excellent, brother. Honored to have you here. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us here today. We've got another episode of the Porn to Purpose podcast. Today, we've got a special guest, Jeddy Azuma from the Rising Man community. And Jeddy, I'm honored to have you here today as well, brother. We've met before. Jeddy's had me on his podcast as well. So really happy to be reconnected with Jeddy here today. What I'd love to do, Jeddy, is just read your bio, if that's okay. Just kind of give you a proper introduction, and then we'll go ahead and dig in. Sound good?
Yeah, let's go.
Right on, brother. So, host of the Rising Man podcast and creator of the Rising Man movement, Jeddy has been in the field of men's leadership and empowerment for the past 10 years. As a rites of passage guide, mentor, and leadership coach, Jeddy has impacted the lives of thousands of men on his mission to initiate an entire generation of men into power and purpose-driven service to the world. Despite his many roles and contribution to men's work, Jeddy considers his most important jobs to be a father and husband. Welcome, Jeddy Azuma.
Thank you, bro. Thank
Right
you,
on,
thank you,
brother.
thank you for having me here. It's
Right
good to
on,
be
brother.
in this seat. This is the seat I enjoy the most, is letting
Yes,
you
sir.
steer
Yes,
and I
sir.
just enjoy the ride.
Yeah, appreciate you, brother. Yeah, man. I came across you, I think probably over the last year or two, as I've been working in the Making Peace with Porn community and kind of building our movement over there, and coming up and just kind of like seeing what you guys got going on and just noticing you and, a young man leading a large community of men and making some noise over there and hearing people talk about you and referencing, Rising Man and the work you've been doing, brother. And yeah, everything that comes with it, man. And, it's really good to have you here. So I'd love to just dig in today and just learn more about you, brother, learn more about what you're doing, learn more about the ways in which you're focusing on the men's work and the ways in which you're impacting the world, brother. And I'd love to start off today by just kind of opening it up for you. And I'd love if you could just maybe give a brief introduction of yourself, tell us who you are, where you're coming from, and maybe what's been inspiring you as of late, brother.
Yeah, man. Thanks for the opportunity to do that. Firstly, I'll say thanks for calling me a young man. I'm 34 and I feel like I'm getting older every day.
Oh, man.
But yeah, it's always good to get that reminder. Yeah, I reside here in sunny Santa Cruz, California. It's a gorgeous day over here right now. I'm a husband of 7 years, and I have two small children, a 6-year-old son and a 2.5-year-old daughter. You know, the thing that I get many opportunities to introduce myself, and the way I was inspired to do it today was to say that I'm not unique. I'm like every single man out there. I have my resistances, I have my challenges. When things get tough, I have an ego that wants to run and hide, whether it's in substances or pornography or in just self-sabotaging behavior. And I think that that's probably the thing that unites us all, is that we're all susceptible to our own self-sabotaging behavior. When I was in my mid-20s, I didn't know any of the things that I know now. 10 years ago, I didn't know any of this stuff, and there also was no mentorship around me, so I had to go looking for it. And a 4-month journey with a backpack on. I'm originally from the East Coast. I traveled to the West Coast and just wandered around for 4 months and found some mentorship, found some elder men who were holding men's circles, and simultaneously found a rites of passage community that ceremonialized the initiation into manhood. And the combination of those two things is really what birthed my interest in giving this gift back. Because after I spent a couple of years of having gone through that and experiencing it, it was like I was walking around with a secret sauce that nobody else had and everyone was interested in. And I was like, man, how's anybody surviving in the world without this? And so yeah, that's probably the most abbreviated way to introduce myself. There's a lot of little stories and anecdotes woven in there, but I'll leave that up to you for where you want to go.
Yeah, brother, appreciate that. And yeah, I hope you received the young man compliment as a compliment, brother. You do strike me just youthful. You know what I'm saying? If you would have told me you were in your 20s, I would have believed that. And I think one thing that has struck me most about you is the community that you do lead. You know what I mean? At your age, can you tell us maybe a little bit more about the Rising Man community and what you guys got going on, and just tell us a little bit about that, brother?
Yeah, man, you said in the intro, the Rising Man movement is an initiative to initiate an entire generation of men into purpose and powerful leadership. And the Rising Man started as an idea in a coffee shop back in 2017. I wanted to create a community of men around the question, what does it mean to be a man? I was still kind of figuring that out for myself. And so I started with the podcast, and I realized that, wow, there's some momentum here. Guys want to have this conversation, and develop the community. And now I think we're on like 5 continents now, and we've got, thousands of guys who listen to the podcast and hundreds of guys in our community that interact on a daily basis. And so, yeah, man, it's really powerful, and it's growing. And I like to think of it as we are one clan of men on this massive frontier of men's work. And yeah, I'm really excited about where the Rising Man's going and the types of relationships that we're creating from having experiences together and staying committed to each other.
Yeah, brother, beautiful. What sort of like what does your structure look like inside of your organization? I know you've got like a group coaching format, and you work in one-on-one, and like what does your format look like?
Yeah, pretty much top to bottom. We have like the entry level opportunities for guys who, there's the podcast. Anybody can listen to that, men and women. And then we have a program called Ignite, which is kind of like you're dipping your toes, getting your feet wet in our way and our context for what it means to establish a foundation for yourself and your life as a man. And then we have, other levels of programs and groups and trainings that basically prepare men for 2 things: for leadership and for accountability. 2 most important things. Obviously, there's other things wrapped up in that: purpose, vision, values. That it's amazing to me, because I've been doing this for so long, but how many men in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s who have never answered the question, what do I really want? Or what do I actually care about? And answered it honestly. So as simply as I can put it, we have, we have an online community, obviously, especially with the times of COVID, but we do many in-person experiences too, because we all know the power of in-person work.
Yeah. Who's a good fit for your community, Jeddy? Like what sort of men do you find that you typically attract?
Yeah, if we're looking for kind of like the bullseye, generally men in their mid-20s to mid to late 30s are the guys that we attract. Usually it's guys who are interested in purpose and relationship and don't know what the hell they're doing in either of those fronts. Maybe they also have a mission in mind for what they want to do in their life, and they're just a little bit lost or not sure how to make that happen. And so that's a really good fit, because we have a lot of amazing tools that help men get there. And it's really just the stuff that helped me get to where I am. That's turning the medicine into the gift.
Yeah, beautiful, man, beautiful. I know you, well, in reading your bio, it says you've been involved in this work for 10 years. Have you been kind of coaching for that long, or is that just kind of when you began your own journey in this work as well?
Well, the very, very first time I ever sat in a men's circle was when I was 21 years old. And it's kind of a cool story. It happened organically. I have an amazing group of friends from college, and we had, in our senior year of college, we just naturally, organically decided to start having community meetings. Anybody who wanted to come, men, women, children, whatever. We served tea, and there was a facilitator, and we just talked. We just like expressed ourselves. Yeah. And it was amazing. And so we were doing this for probably half a year. And then one night, I remember we were sitting down at my buddy's house. We were having some pizza. There were 6 of us, men. We sat down, and one of us said, so let's talk about what's really going on. And we all kind of looked at each other like, what are you talking about? Yeah. And he's like, I mean, what's like really going on? Like, how are you guys doing? And for the next like 3 hours, we just dove deep and shared some things that we hadn't shared with anybody before. And these are like my closest friends at the time. So that was really like my first dip. I'm 34 now. So that was when I was 21. And we continued to circle up as brothers, even beyond college. We all stayed really close. But it wasn't until I got to the West Coast that I was really sitting with men who had structure and formula and experience when it comes to how to navigate this work, how to be vulnerable at a depth that I didn't even know was possible, how to challenge each other in a healthy way, how to break each other open with our questions. So that really started for me when I was back in that like beginning of that 10-year mark. I started coaching and leading 2 years into that. So say around the age of 27.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any sort of career aspirations before this work, or did you just kind of just jump right into the coaching and the personal development work?
Well, interestingly enough, my original occupation was as a physical therapist. I have a doctorate in physical therapy, and I did
Doctorate.
physical therapy. Yeah, I did physical
Oh,
therapy um, at variable rates of full to part time over the past 10 years. I finally gave it up altogether in June of last year to step into this fully. But yeah, I was dabbling in both for a while, and I never imagined myself in this kind of role, which I know is a very familiar story when people are talking about purpose and vision and when they're really living their gift. But that's the truth for me. I literally had a vision. The first ever time in my life I had a vision when I was on that 4-month trip. I did a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And on day 4, after a really beautiful, pure present meditation, I stepped outside. There was like a sun shower that happened as soon as I stepped out of the pavilion, and I just started crying. And as I blinked my eyes, I saw myself sitting around a fire with men. And I was like, what was that? And I blinked my eyes again, and I could look around like I was watching a movie in the future. And I was like, what the hell is that? And so at that point, I was 25 years old. I'm like, I don't know what to make of that. I don't feel prepared to step into that, but it was certainly a foreboding of what my life was going to be about.
yeah, beautiful, brother, beautiful. I know you mentioned men helping men connect to their purpose, maybe a greater sense of what they're called to do here in life. And our coaching community, we've moved to this idea of porn to purpose. Porn being such a big piece of the long-term abstinence puzzle, and purpose being such a big part of the why. Like, why take the higher road? Why even get out of bed in the morning? Why make the more difficult choices? And for me, what I find most rewarding in our work is whenever a man is able to make this shift from these toxic habits and behaviors in their life and kind of uproot the stuff that's been tying them down and connecting to their greater sense of purpose and seeing that life come back into their eyes, and they're reconnecting with their family and saying, I'm stepping more into the life I'm called to live and the man that I'm called to be, and really seeing men begin to connect with that zest for life. I'm curious, like, what do you find most rewarding about the work that you're doing with men?
Well, I mean, first of all, man, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you and the work you're doing. You told me you got like over 700 guys in your community that you're helping out now, and that's amazing. Because to me, whether it's pornography, alcohol, sex, social media, video games, to me, it's all the same. I know that there's like subtleties to each one, but I believe that all of those are just symptoms of a deeper problem. The source. Here's a physical therapy example, right? A lot of times people would come in and say, oh, my back hurts, take my back pain away, take my back pain away, because that was the symptom. But the source of the problem was weak core muscles, or the fact that they sit on the couch all day or in front of their phone like this, right? It's not. So when we look at things like pornography, for example, I think that is a symptom of a deeper problem. And what do I think that deeper problem is? It's usually some pain, trauma, lack of confidence, lack of clarity, long-term patterning. I mean, you name it. It's not. This is where I love our work, because it's so simple. It's nobody's actually that unique. You can pretty much trace it back to some simple component parts. The ingredient is being vulnerable enough to be honest. And I think specifically with things like pornography and other vices and addictions, there's a lot of shame wrapped up around that. The social narrative is that everybody watches pornography, right? I think the average age of first view, you probably know better than I do, but I think it's like 8 years old now, which is crazy to me. 8 years old. I mean, those images would have been terrifying to me as an 8-year-old, and especially the porn that they have now. It's crazy. But just the volume of consumption that we have to disguise a deeper problem is really what's going on. So when I think about my work and my approach to that, every single man in their heart of hearts, I don't care how vile or disgusting anybody thinks they are. I mean, bottom of the barrel dudes, right? Like the worst of the worst guys out there are just wounded men to me, who in their heart of hearts want to be of service to their community, to their family, to the world. And they just don't know how to get there. So as simply as I can put it, my work, your work, our work is helping men address the deeper lying problem so they can get back to being the men that they want to be in this world. And that's where I get off, man. I just love that stuff, because when you see a man really open up, it usually doesn't happen overnight, but when you can work with a man over the course of years and see him really transform his life, it's so rewarding, because there's nothing worse than a wounded man living his entire life in darkness.
Mhm.
It's not good for anybody.
Beautiful, brother. Thanks so much for that share, man. I'd love to ask you, Jeddy, maybe if you could elaborate more around, we mentioned it, maybe we can touch on this a little bit today too. Like, what does it mean to be a man? And I feel like that's such a common question today. So I don't want to be cliche with my questions. I'd love to invite you to share a little bit more about these ideas of the men's circle, the initiation work that you're doing. And like, what does that really mean? And what is the significance of that in a man's life? And yeah, how meaningful is that in today's modern world?
Yeah, man. Well, I think that one of the core wounds, and we could talk about humans in general, but just to focus on men, people who identify as men, one of those deep core wounds of purpose is belonging. We all desperately want to belong.
Mm-hmm.
You watch these movies where there's initiations and brotherhood, some of the old war movies where men were going to battle with each other, and there's a reason why it appeals to us, right? Because it's in our DNA.
Yeah.
You go back far enough, every single one of us has not just a few ancestors, like a long legacy of ancestors who depended on each other, who fought for each other, who had to go through different initiatory rites in order to demonstrate that they were ready to step into adulthood, into manhood. And I think that there's because we become so separate, and because we've lost many of these rituals that signify an initiation into manhood, an initiation into almost like a secret society, right? It's like being part of the club, right? Oh, you did your rite of passage. Oh, wow, awesome. So you're one of us.
Yeah.
There's something about that is medicine for a man's soul, and so there's many different ways for men to achieve that. There's some really unhealthy ways, right? I often think of gang initiations or fraternity initiations, and that initiation culture has gotten a bit tainted and just say lost. I think it's just lost and misguided over the years. But if you boil it down to its component parts, it's trying to serve that instinctual need that all men have to belong to something bigger than them. And just to touch on that question for a second of what it means to be a man, I think it's really simple. Before I became a man, before I identified myself as a man, life was all about me. It's not to say that I don't slip into that ego from time to time where it's about me and I make it about me. But really stepping across that threshold into manhood means I do a 180-degree turn and I start looking outside of myself. My life is about everyone else around me. It's about service to everything outside of myself. I still take care of me, but but I take care of me so that I can be of greater service outside of myself. And to me, that's the most clear delineation between a boy and a man. And not to say that the boy is wrong. That's his job. His job is to make it all about himself so that he can prepare himself for that massive responsibility of service. So yeah, that's what I've got on that. I don't know if you want me to go a little deeper into any part.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I do have some other questions kind of off of that, but I just want to ask you, like, what might a typical initiation, like weekend or event look like, Jeddy?
Well, the way we initiate men in our community, the way I was initiated into manhood, was a ceremonial 4-day vision fast. So being able to go out into the wilderness with no food, no tent, no technology, in the remote wilderness by myself for 4 days, being guided by initiated men, right? That's the key. Can't initiate yourself, right? You can't initiate yourself into the club because you're not in it. So what that looks like for us is we bring a group of men out there. We go through months of preparation internally and in the physical realm as well to get you ready to be out there. And then we put guys up in the desert, on the mountain, in the forest for 4 days and 4 nights of solo time. Wow. No food. In the way we do it, we allow you to have water, but the sacrifice of food, the sacrifice of comforts, the sacrifice of sleep, the sacrifice of distractions is what we give up in exchange for greater clarity of self, greater internal clarity, greater listening to what this internal voice is saying, because it's talking all the time. There's just usually too much background noise and distractions in our lives to really hear what's going on in here. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's what we, in our organization, Rising Man, we call it Compass, because we like the mythology and the thematic of finding your true north, finding your vision, finding your purpose. Yeah. It's not what some people think of, going out there and hallucinating and having like crazy visions. It's really about self-clarity, clarity of self, mm-hmm. and really getting to know who you are when all of the other things, all the layers are stripped away.
Yeah. What would you say is the average range of men that engage in this work with you?
We've taken out 18-year-olds, and we've taken out, I think, 53, 54-year-olds. I know communities where there's men who are fasting in their 60s and 70s. And we're also getting ready to expand into bringing teenagers out for rites of initiation. Because the idea is, when I first got into this, I thought I wanted to just work with teens, because I recognized that there's a really sensitive time, usually around the age of 12 in grade school, but it's usually between grade 6 and 7. I worked in middle schools for a long time. There's something that happens between grade 6 and 7 where boys, they just shut down. It's the social pressures, it's the bullying culture, it's all that stuff. Who they are just starts to fade and melt away. And they put up that iron mask, that chainmail armor to protect themselves and to survive in school. So my initial hit was, okay, well, we got to get to those guys before that happens. And then I realized that, well, we still have multiple generations of uninitiated men who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? Most of them are running the country and running the world. So I felt like we needed to initiate the generation of fathers and uncles, so that that younger generation could see the example of what it looks like to be initiated, to go through a rite of passage, to ceremonially mark their passage into manhood. And then gradually we can start walking the timeline back. That's why we want to initiate a whole generation of men, so that this is just the way we do it. And I have a 6-year-old son. My vision is, by the time he's ready and his uncles deem that he's ready, he'll go out there, and he already knows what it's all about. He's like, oh yeah, daddy's going out to lead another vision fast again. That's my prayer, is that he'll have that for himself, and there will already be a vast community of people who practice this way and who know what this way is about.
Yeah, beautiful, brother. How much research or how much investigation have you done, or maybe you can share with us, like what do some of the earlier ceremonies or initiations look like, and how does yours kind of compare? Have you done some looking into that? I would imagine.
When you say earlier, do you mean other traditions?
Yeah, I think about like early Native American traditions, or just more tribal traditions, maybe from 100 years ago when this was a more common thing. And how does the modern day, your version, kind of compare to that?
Yeah, so the legacy of the rite of passage that we practice comes from a community called the School of Lost Borders, and then I was trained in a community called Condor Clan in Southern California. Now it's inspired by many different traditional rites of passages, but it's not connected to any specific indigenous tradition. So I'm always very clear on that, because I don't want to misrepresent or I would give due respect, because I'm also heavily involved in the Native American church, and I understand the distinctions and the reason why we need to be respectful of different ways. That being said, every single one of us, whether you come from European ancestry, South American ancestry, North American ancestry, Euro-Asian ancestry, Australian ancestry, every single community that you could possibly have come from had land-based rites of passages, rituals, ceremonies that signified specific transitions and moments, milestones in a person's life. There were rites of passages for women. There were rites of passages for men, boys, girls, elders, every single one of us. And so I have a really close brother of mine named Sean Barry. He's been in this work. He's been leading rites of passages in this way for over 20 years now. He helps us out in Rising Man with Compass. And he often refers to rites of passage as a birthright, because every single one of us has it in our DNA. We may have forgotten it. Most of us probably never had one. That's right. That's why we're offering what we offer now. But that's the way I look at it, is that every single one of us had this in our lineage somewhere. So every single one of them looked a little bit different, but the majority of them incorporated some amount of solo time out in the wilderness. Those are some of the common denominators. The facing off the unknown, taking on nature, not conquering nature, but engaging with it fully and not being afraid of it. And being able to, there's a certain confidence and resilience that you cultivate by being on your own, truly on your own, for the first time in your life. And so I think that's probably one of the common denominators too, is these rites of passages and ceremonies and rituals, they were derived based on what the community needed from the men, right? So what the community's needs were informed the particular ceremonies and rituals they had in order to prepare these individuals to be of service to the community.
Yeah.
That's what it was all about. I mean, you could look at, I mean, rites of passage is a very general term. Graduating from college is a rite of passage. And the process of going and getting your training as a physical therapist is like preparing to go out into the world and be of service as a physical therapist, right? And that was a rite of passage. But on more of a meta scale, right? The fundamental human skills that are required to survive in the world and to be a contributing human citizen, those are not taught in college.
Yeah.
And so that's why we need these ceremonies.
Yeah, beautiful. What would you say, like, what are some of the things, or what are some of the insights or revelations, like what translates from an initiation, from a ceremony, and what does a man carry forth with him typically? What are some of the things you see into life? Like, what does he move from that ceremony with?
You know, I get this question a lot. It's a really important question, and it varies. It varies for each man, because every single man who's marking that transformation in his life is going through something different. I know I said before that none of us are unique, but sometimes the details of our story are unique. So it really depends. The one thing I can say as the thing that every man leaves with is greater clarity. No matter what, if you spend those 4 days on your own, without food, without distractions, you will 100% gain a deeper understanding and learning about who you are, what matters to you, what you care about. There's something about being brought closer to death than you've ever been before. Right? Your body starts to feel it. Your senses are tuned up. Your body starts to slow down. Your heart rate slows down. You're literally approaching death. If you continued on without eating, and especially without water for long enough, you would die. Yeah. And as that happens, there's a clarity that comes in. We hear people reference this when they're on their deathbed or they have a near-death experience, the clarity and the insights that come through. So I can't speak to something specifically. It does range. Many men get inspired to pursue something that they didn't have the courage or confidence to before, whether that's a new career path or a new relationship or you name it, right? But it all stems back to a deeper understanding of self.
Yeah, beautiful, man. Have you ever felt like, Jeddy, like, who am I to do this work? Or do you ever feel like that? I know I do in my work oftentimes, you know.
Yeah, man, I think that's what keeps us humble, right? And those are the leaders that I trust the most, the guys who can lead from the front, but also admit that I don't have this whole thing figured out. I can't do it all by myself. Because I think that's what makes the difference between a leader and like a guru, like these modern day gurus who want to project this sort of like messianic context of who they are, right? And it's the problem with that is it's inaccessible. It's, first of all, it's not real. None of those people throughout the course of history who were seen that way were ever actually that way behind the scenes, right? So it's not real. And on the other hand, it's important to make ourselves seem human, because we're all human. The question of, do I ever question myself, like, who am I to do this work? All the time. Yeah. All the time, man, because it's so much bigger than me. It's so much bigger than me. I'm literally just a cog in the wheel. And some people, they approach me these days because I've got a little bit of notoriety now from the podcast, the work I do. They're like, "Oh my God, are you Jeddy Azuma, the rising man?" And I'm like, "Oh man, it's such a test for my ego," because my ego, there's a part of me that wants to feel that significance, like, yes, I am the rising man. And then there's the other part of me that's like, dude, I just got into a huge argument with my wife and I completely went below the line and I totally went backwards on my values for a minute. I'm no different than you, man. And I'm no better than any other man. I'm just out here doing my best. The last thing I'll say about that is there was a time when I was in my late 20s when I was inspired to start doing this work. And I wasn't sure if I was ready. And one of my mentors, a man named Kent Pierce, founder of Condor Clan, man who was very instrumental in my step through the walks of rites of passage. I sat down and had lunch with him and I said, "Hey man, I really want to do this thing. I really want to start bringing men out on fasts, but I don't know if I'm ready. But I really want to do it. I know it seems urgent. Men need this." And I'll never forget the look he had in his eyes. He's kind of a coyote character. He looked at me and he's like, "What are you waiting for?" And I was like, he's like, "Are you waiting for permission? Because here you go." And he took his hand and he punched me in the forehead. And he's like, boom, stamped. He's like, "You're certified. Go do what you got to do." And I laughed because, he wouldn't just say that flippantly, right? He was acknowledging like, "You're ready, dude. What are you waiting for?" But there is something about this passing on the work Like I think of old like blacksmiths. They always had apprentices, and they would be responsible for the mentorship of the apprentice. And then when the apprentice was ready, they would, give them the stamp of approval.
Yeah.
You're ready to go. And I think that's long been lost. So that also keeps me really humble, because I know that I always have more to learn, and I always have other people to learn from, until I'm the elder sitting across the table from a young man who says, I want to do this, but I don't know if I'm ready. And then I get to punch him in the head.
Yeah. I love that, bro. Yeah. So much of my work is really like orienting myself to the true self, my higher self, and remembering it's not about me, man. My job is to do my best and be my best and be a clear channel for whatever needs to come through. And beyond that, it's about it's not about me. It's something greater that's working through me. You know what I mean? And what is really called for and wanted and needed at that time. I think that's important to remember as well.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, I think it's a balance. It's always a balance, right? There's the humility that's required to not make it about ourselves, but also the ego to give us the confidence to step forward into that, right?
Yeah.
To be leading the charge of 700 men, man, that's a massive responsibility. But it's clear that you're serving in your role and your capacity, because the people are showing up and they're asking you for your medicine. They want to learn from what you've learned. Like every single human on this planet, I believe, has a role like that to play. For some of us, it's leading millions of people. Others, it's maybe a few hundred. Some of us, it's just leading our family. But none of them are more significant or important than the other, in my opinion.
Yeah. Amen, brother. Um, yeah, man. Do you feel like a man, Jeddy?
I do. There's moments where I see my boy come out, and so over the years I've realized that there's a boy who's riding on the bus with me all the time, and if I'm not paying attention, he's going to grab the wheel and he's just going to like jerk it around, drive us crazy off the road. So yeah, sometimes I refer to it as slipping below the line or stepping out of my values. But all in all, I believe absolutely I recognize myself as a man. There's certain metrics I have for that. I know what my mission in my life is. I can convey my values clearly to anyone who's interested in hearing them. I can tell people what my life is about, and I back up my words.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect, but I do my best to be impeccable.
Mhm.
And to me, that's the version of the man I want to be. That's a really important thing too. Something I've learned over the years is there's no overarching definition of what a man is. I think anyone who identifies as a man has to define for themselves what is that standard of being a man that you subscribe to. Because I've been in workshops with people who were born female and then had gender reassignment surgery and consider themselves men. And to me, it's, hey, man is a term that's reserved for anybody who identifies as one.
Yeah.
I don't see it as gender specific. And I think that's why we make a distinction between men and males and masculinity. To me, those are three entirely different things. Not entirely different, but three different distinctions. So everyone's got to define that for themselves. And the definition of a man I have for myself, I am confident that I'm fulfilling that. And that's why I can say comfortably that, yes, I'm a man.
Yeah. I appreciate that, man. I think that's why those initiation processes are so important, man. For much of my life, I felt like a little boy inside, and I feel like as we step into responsibility, as we step into alignment, with our values and step into greater levels of integrity and leadership and just faith, in the world and in life, that we begin to recognize a transition, but it's interesting to like kind of notice and observe that transition from feeling like a boy and kind of perceiving ourselves as a boy and really recognizing ourselves in that different light and that different capacity. And I think it's a very unique journey, obviously, and a very personal journey. And just, I appreciate you sharing yours, man. How much did stepping into your role as a husband and a father impact that perception of yourself, brother?
That's great. That's an important part of my story that I didn't share yet. So at the same time that I went on that 4-month journey and I met these men who were hosting men's circles and practicing leadership work within their own team, and when I met the community, the Rites of Passage community, I also met my wife at the same time. It was like a 1, 2, 3 punch. And it was amazing. And it was so synchronistic and serendipitous. And I didn't, I fell in love very quickly, and I decided to move across the country and be with this woman, and declared my love for her. We got engaged when I was 26, and I had learned enough to make that step forward, but I hadn't learned everything that I needed in order to show up as the husband and the father that I wanted to be. My wife is 6 years older than me, so she was ready for all the things. She's like, I want to start having kids right away. Are you down for that? And I said, yes, let's do it. Because I know I want to have a family, and I want to have a family with you. If that's what you need, let's do it. And so there's a little bit of like, I would call it on the job training, where if I look back on it, and when I work with men who aren't in relationship, I really encourage them to get clear on these things that I had to kind of figure out on the fly before stepping into a relationship. I think it helps to navigate some of the typical breakdowns that happen in relationships when men aren't clear on their values, on who they are, on what matters to them, on their boundaries. That's another big one. Cleaning up some of the messes that they have, the avoidant behaviors, before stepping into a relationship and really attracting somebody who matches what they want, who they really are. And then as a father, I mean, we got engaged when I was 26. We got married right after my 27th birthday, and we were pregnant 3 months later. So it was like, it was a fast track, man. And then not only that, but 8 months before we got married, my wife was she was fired. I mean, laid off? They did a bunch of layoffs in her company. So all of a sudden, I was the sole provider of a family, and then 12 months later, my wife's pregnant with our first kid, and I'm 27 years old. What the heck? So yeah, there was a lot of like learning on the fly, and it was rocky at times, but I did have my men's team that really supported me. I wouldn't have survived it. I would not have survived it. I had my rites of passage community reminding me of who I am and who I really am underneath all of the doubts and the fears. And to me, that's why I'm so big on men's communities that are really founded on a common culture. For us, it's initiation, it's leadership, it's accountability, it's values and vision. And for other communities, it's other things, right? Some men are organized more around a spiritual practice. I know in the Christian community, a lot of Christian men have Bible study. And to me, all I see are the common threads of men getting together, being honest with each other, stripping away the layers so that vulnerability is accessible and safe. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful, brother. It's an interesting time we live in, an interesting world, man. And I often think, man, are we here to serve specifically, because of this time, because of this era that we live in, and I'm curious, as a leader of other men, as a husband, as a father, with oftentimes what seems to be a general insecurity or instability within the world, or more chaos around us, just turn on the news and you can see that. Like, what keeps you grounded, oriented, powerful, and in faith during this time, brother?
Oh man, you're killing me. It's such a good timing for this question, because in my early 20s, when I was smoking a bunch of weed and numbing out from life, I was asking myself all of the existential questions. Like I was for the first time in my life seeing the pains of the world, the darkness of the world, and it was so uncomfortable for me. I just had to run away from it. And the thing is that none of that actually went away. I just realized that I can't save the world myself. What can I do? And I've asked myself that question. So that question is one of the things that's really grounded me and helped me. But the reason why it's so funny is because it's not like I ever get over those existential questions. I still have them all the time. In fact, I'd say just in the past month, I went through another spin on the spin cycle of existential questions, and, looking at environmental climate change, looking at, resources, water, all of this stuff that is huge. And especially with children, right? I mean, that's what you're pointing to. Like, I think about that all the time. And what helped ground me and get me out of the spin cycle this time was recommitting to harnessing the full expression of my masculine power. For me, that's getting back to my physicality, my physical practices. With 2 small kids and a wife and a business, it's not easy for me to prioritize that, but I have to. So this week I signed up for a gym, and I've been going and getting workouts in at 6 a.m., waking up at 5 o'clock so I can get out there at 6, and prioritizing my physicality, reprioritizing my spiritual practice, even though I feel very strong in my spiritual practice, reprioritizing that, making that a daily thing. and communication with my wife, like things that make me really feel like I'm the man that I know I can be. And then just trusting that when I walk around in the world as that man, the world becomes a better place. It doesn't fix all of the problems in the world, and it never will, but it's a contribution in the right direction. So I guess simply I could say it's reminding myself of what I am in control of, and then taking command of those things, and really just kicking ass, you know.
Amen. What are some of the common things? What are some of the common themes that you're seeing coming up for guys in your community right now, Jeddy? What's some of the common stuff guys are dealing with, and what are you finding is helpful for them as they work through some of these things?
There's so many, man. I mean, there's so many topics that I can do on my own podcast when I do my solo episodes. It's like it's never ending. The first one that came up when you asked me that though was commitment. One of the things I got from my men's team, the circle of men that I was sitting with for many years, was just really having a higher standard for what commitment means. A lot of people use the word commitment nowadays, but they don't really mean it. And it kind of waters down the value of that word. I think that one of the most important things we have as men is our word, that I tell you I will do something, I tell you I will be there, and I am. And that's something that's nurtured and cultivated over time. A lot of times I talk about it as making an investment in the trust bank, right? It's currency, right? Trust is currency. And we can, for the crypto guys out there, we can mine trust by making those investments in the bank, showing up, doing what we said we were going to do, doing it for ourselves, being able to trust ourselves and be committed to ourselves. And my men's team really drilled it into me, and it became my way of life. And so when I started working with guys who had no idea what commitment was or how to commit, it was really frustrating. And even now, man, sometimes I'm like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? And it bothers me. But then I realized that commitment is not an innate skill. It's not something that we're born knowing how to do. My 6-year-old son does not know how to commit to something. He's learning, he's practicing, but it's a practiced skill. It's something that needs to be developed over time. And, if you have a couple of generations of men who are not their word, men who are womanizers and step out on their marriage, men who, go back and forth with struggles with addiction, staying committed is not something that has been modeled for us. So we don't know how to do it. So we literally are, again, like similar to the initiations, we're kind of like backing up the timeline and reinstituting a culture of commitment. So that's one of the things that we're always working with. Another big one is self-worth and self-love. I find that, and I think it's all connected. I could sit here and I could string the whole narrative together. Everyone's the same. We inherit these beliefs from our authority figures when we're children about who we are, how the world is. And we are never told that we need to reclaim authority for ourselves as adults. Author, literally the root word of authority is author. Like, who's writing the story? Who's calling the shots in your life? I can't tell you how many times I've sat down with a man and I've worked with him and I've broken him down and said, dude, even though you don't live with your parents anymore, they're still running your life. They're still running your life because you're looking for that approval. You're still looking for somebody else to tell you what to do. And as much as it sucks to take on that responsibility, if you want a life of freedom and a life of mission and purpose, you got to take responsibility for yourself. So responsibility and self-love, they go really closely together. Responsibility of self, right? Paying your own cell phone bills, getting out from under your mom's house and doing some of those simple things. But even in a more abstract way, getting out from under the authority of anybody who you've given authority to in your life growing up, and taking full ownership of your own life. That's still something that most men don't know how to do.
Love it, brother. We've got maybe 10 minutes or so left, and I would love to just this is the Porn to Purpose, podcast, and we are broadcasting obviously inside the Making Peace with Porn community as well here today. I'd love to ask you, brother, what are you seeing within your community around the issue of pornography? What are men dealing with? How prevalent of an issue is that? A lot of people, it's interesting. Some people are really, really aware of the pandemic of pornography, but some people are they totally have no idea what some men are dealing with. So what are you seeing, and what are some of what's some of the guidance or some of the clues that you're giving men as they work to navigate themselves out of this issue within their own lives?
I would wager to say it's very similar to the men that you have in your community, varying degrees of awareness, but I'd say the majority of the guys in our community have an understanding of the consequences and the the side effects of pornography and frequent porn use and viewing. I mean, a lot of the guys in our community are well versed on like the physiological effects too, and the effects it could have on your sexual intimacy with partners and your perceptions of women and objectification. So a lot of the guys are educated on that stuff, but we still have guys coming in who are just beginning to acknowledge that they have an unhealthy relationship with pornography. We talk a lot about some of the violent themes in pornography nowadays. I was just doing an interview with a woman on my podcast a few days ago, and we were talking about like the evolution of porn. And I remember like watching some of my friends' dad's porns from like back in the 70s and 80s, and it was totally cheesy and corny, but it was like romantic, and there wasn't like anything that seemed abusive, it was like consensual, it was sweet, it was, and nowadays, I mean, I don't even need to go into it. It's crazy. So I would say that it's probably very similar to your community, man. It's guys recognizing and at varying levels having the courage and confidence to take ownership of their relationship with it and start to change it and make it different. I spoke to it a little bit earlier on this podcast, where to me it's just another symptom of a deeper problem. So what is the deeper problem? Let's start talking about that. What in what times in your life, what moments of your life, what's happening, what's the circumstances in which you bust out your phone and go masturbate to porn or just look at some porn, right? What is the driving factor behind that? And I find the most important thing is alleviating men of the shame of that, right? Because once we have awareness, it's our responsibility, right? Once you have awareness of this pandemic, like you called it, it's our responsibility. But up until that point, if you don't have the knowledge, wisdom, or awareness, then dude, it's not like you're trying to make the world a worse place. So don't beat yourself up for it. I find that also, this is something else I say about shame, because shame is often associated with things like pornography and masturbation. I find that shame is just it's like a pit stop on the way to solutions. It's like, what do they call it? Purgatory. Shame is a purgatory. There's like the shame purgatory of, oh man, I'm such a bad person. Oh, I can't, I've got so many bad habits. It's like, dude, you're just feeling bad for yourself. Let's get around to what can you do about that? Get over that, have some compassion and move forward towards the solution. And I think that's what people don't want to do, is it's harder to say, okay, I'm ready to give this up. Yeah. And everything that you're doing, man, in your community, I haven't spent much time in there, but just in the conversations we've had and knowing who you are as a man, I can tell that you're not bringing shame to that. You're bringing solutions to it and support, right? Support. It's not like, it's just another addiction, man. It's like people who have a hard time quitting smoking. It's not an overnight process. Maybe for some people it is if they've got that type of discipline, but it's just like pattern conditioned behavior that is masking deeper emotional and traumatic wounds. Yeah. That ain't gonna happen overnight. That's like years of work. So buckle your seatbelt, dig in, and be gentle with yourself in the process.
Amen, brother. Amen. Yeah, brother. Well, thank you so much for your insight on that one. And as we kind of wrap to a close today, brother, what's your message for the world, brother? Maybe anybody that's listening to this, like what would be like a key takeaway? Like, what's a theme for you right now that you really want the brothers that may be tuning into this to hear, brother?
I'm going to put my hand on my heart, because that's where my truth comes from. And I'm recognizing that I do these interviews all the time, and I haven't been asked that question in a long time. So yeah, the message that I have for the world is that it's all about the kids. It's all about the children. It's all about the next generation. It's about the future generations who won't know your name. It's about the great grandchildren that you will never meet. Our actions today are influencing the lives that they will have, and we all need to take responsibility for that. It's way past due time, right? It's time for us to live life our way now. And that not only that, that is one of the most noble things that anyone can do with their life, is to live with consideration and attention towards the future, doing our best with what we can, being gentle and kind with ourselves in the process, but also raising the standard for what it means to be a responsible human being on this planet. And so it's all about the kids, man. And I don't care if you're a father, I don't care if you're an uncle or an auntie biologically, we are all responsible for every child on this planet. And I think if we made our lives if we arranged our society that way, where we took responsibility for the children and the elders, it's a whole nother conversation, then all of the Earth's problems, all of our problems on Earth, not Earth's problems, our problems on Earth, and interrelationally would start to be resolved.
Yeah. Amen, brother. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, you got it, man. Honored to be here, man. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for the work that you do. You're a mountain of a man, and I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to reciprocate the medicine in the community.
Me as well, brother. And I also want to invite you, Eddie, Jeddy, just to share, what do you got going on coming up? Where can people connect with you, and what's relevant for you right now that you'd like to let people know about?
Yeah, man, thank you for that. So we've got a lot of really exciting stuff going on in the Rising Man community. The place I've been directing most people right now is we recently created a 12-week online course that goes through, it's an amalgamation of the best stuff I've learned in the last 10 years. And you can do it at your own pace. There's a community of support. We do weekly calls just to help men with where they're at. It's called Ignite, and you can find it on risingman.org. And aside from that, just checking out the content that we've got all the time. At Rising Man Movement on Instagram. You can find me at Jeddy Azuma on Instagram. And the other offer that we talked about today is Compass, the 4-day rite of passage. If anyone's, they heard that and they're interested, all that can be found on the website, risingman.org.
Beautiful, brother. Jeddy, thanks so much for being here today, man. It's an honor to have you, and appreciate your leadership and the way in which you're showing up as an example in this world, brother.
Likewise, man. Such an honor to be here, and thank you for having me. Much love to all of the men in your community who are watching this. Keep at it. Keep doing that good work, making yourself the most valuable man that you can be to this world.
Amen, brother. Appreciate you.
Likewise.
So live stream's ended. Boom, boom. And I'll stop this recording. Hey, thank you so much, brother.